because I think time has caught up with us. It's exactly 1 minute past the time. And I'll just start by introducing myself as the moderator of today's session. My name is Rose Rono. I'm an international trade specialist based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar. We have an excellent panel of professionals who are well versed in matters to do with trade facilitation. And I believe we are going to have very good exchanges that will further the cause of trade facilitation and specifically for women, which is our topic for today. So to start us off today, we are going to have Nadia Hasham from United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to just set the tone by giving us, results of a survey that was undertaken. And after that, we're going to have discussions and other panelists coming up. So I'd like to welcome I'd like to welcome Nadia. But before Nadia, you come in, I can see we already have our flyer there. So maybe I can just give an introduction of some of the panelists, but I'll give detailed bios when they're coming on to speak. We have Martin Gasasira from Rwanda, Trade Promotion and Facilitation from Rwanda Development Board. We have Miss Evelyn Obidike, Director Trade Information, Nigeria Export Promotion Council. We have Aranza from Economic Affairs Officer, Trade Facilitation Section of UNCTAD. We have Alina Petisova, Trade Facilitation Program Officer, International Trade Center. We have Candice White, Knowledge Specialist, Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. We have with us the Commissioner of Customs, Zambia Revenue Authority, Mr. Sidney Chibabuka, Ms. Binal Munshe, Regional Consultant, ESCWA. And we also have Gloria Atuhire, Director Gender and Inclusion, Women in and Women Trade Program, Trademark East Africa. So I want to welcome all of you, and to start us off, let us have Nadia Hisham to present to us the survey, and then we can have discussions afterwards. If you have a question, you're free to put the question on the chat. And also after the presentations, we will give a few minutes for interventions. You can put your hand up and we'll be able to pick out your question. So welcome, Nadia.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you for colleagues for attending and participating, and Rose for facilitating this session. For the UN Economic Commission for Africa, we are particularly pleased to be hosting this part of this session because we've noticed in our region very many measures that have related to supporting women in trade, and particularly given the significance of women in trade on the continent. But we're also very pleased to have with us members from other regions who are able to share good practices as well. And as Rose said, I'm a trade policy expert with the Africa Trade Policy Center of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. And maybe just to give an overview, I don't know how many of you will have been here from the previous session, but this webinar follows from the UN Global Survey on Digital and Sustainable Trade Facilitation that we do with the other UN regional commissions. And this year's survey results are what we're talking about today, but building on to look at best practices and opportunities in this area. Next slide, please. So broadly, the scope of the survey covers the WTO trade facilitation measures. Here we go. The WTO trade facilitation measures, but it also focuses on, as I said, the digital side and the sustainable side. And so we have additional segments looking at SMEs, agriculture, and importantly for us today, women in trade facilitation. We also look at areas like trade finance, and we had a special module this year on trade facilitation in times of crisis. So, the issue of women in trade facilitation is a cross-cutting one. And so we'd like to look at it as a cross-cutting issue for trade facilitation broadly. And sometimes this means we might lack data in being able to measure progress in these areas. And so this is also a good opportunity for us to take stock of where we are in measuring women in trade facilitation. And also maybe to mention ECA's approach to including women in trade, which is through gender mainstreaming. And so making sure that we're looking at the gender dimension of all of our trade policies and the existing underlying inequalities, and then looking at complementary measures that can support women's participation in trade. Next, please. And so now to look at the results of the survey, we've seen that the implementation of trade facilitation measures for women does face some challenges. The implementation rate is globally slightly higher than 30%. And as you can see, as it compares to the other types of trade facilitation measures, whether for SMEs, for agriculture, trade finance, it's sort of in the middle, but could be better. And so that's what we'd like to talk about, as I said, today. And it's important to note as well that developed economies are also facing challenges with the implementation of this measure. So this is a really global challenge, but also opportunity that we're looking at today, and best practices can be drawn globally. Next, please. We have some variation in the measures by region. Some regions, for instance, are ahead in looking at women participation in trade facilitation committees or similar bodies. Other regions are looking ahead in special consideration of female traders, so and others, and specific measures to benefit women involved in trade. And those could be things like having a gender focal point, looking specifically at training that targets and includes women's participation. And for special consideration, this could be policies and strategies that are specifically designed to support women's participation in trade. So as you can see from the next slide, there is some variation globally between regions in those who are doing well. So some regions are doing well in terms of the policy and strategy side. Some regions are doing well in trade facilitation committees, but we still have quite a ways to go in moving us ahead globally towards some of these measures. And we can have a discussion of what the relevant measures are as well to capture women's participation in trade facilitation that are actually working for women. Next, please. So now, just to give you a little bit more detail, 50% of the countries have implemented women's membership in a trade facilitation committee or a similar body. And special consideration is only implemented in less than 40% of the countries. And in all three measures, most of these are mostly on a partial basis or a pilot basis, so not fully implemented in most cases, as you can see from here, except in some of the countries, including some that are represented here today, like Zambia, who have fully implemented some of these measures. So we're looking forward to looking at the best practices from the representatives we have today. And in some cases, we just don't have data actually on the level of implementation. But as we've seen from the previous presentations, and as we'll see from the forthcoming ones, that there are actually good practices, and maybe we're just not capturing them necessarily. And so this is a good opportunity for us to begin that discussion as well. And overall sufficient. The existing policies are not necessarily sufficient, and so we do need to do more to emphasize this aspect of trade. So with that, I'll pass it back to Rose, and looking forward to hearing from all of you the good practices and opportunities, so we can see how we can scale up what's working. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I think I'm really impressed by the survey that you have presented to us. I would say 50% in terms of implementation of membership in national trade facilitation committees is good, but also the other 50% is a really good opportunity. And I'm happy to hear that Zambia is one of those countries that is doing pretty well in this in terms of fully implementation. And we have Sydney, who is a commissioner of customs, who will be able to give us success stories and how Zambia has been able to do it. Also, in terms of policies, yes, I think for the 50% that we've not been able to achieve, or we've not been able to achieve in terms of ensuring that women are incorporated in implementation of trade facilitation initiatives, I think policies and strategies now need to come down, need to be put in place, and I think that's where we are here to be able to deliberate and see what are we doing right and what do we need to be able to ensure that we are moving that 50% to much higher percentages and improving trade and trade facilitation to women. So I just want to, I can't see any question on the chat box, but if you have a question, even if you're a panelist and you have a question to Nadia, feel free to put up your hand and I will call you out. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, I have a question for you, Nadia, from Jan, who is saying, please tell me what you want to see at cross-border crossing points to help gender. That is a question. Tell me what you want to see at road border crossing points to help gender. That's for you, Nadia. I know it's too broad, but you can attempt to bring it, home.
Well, actually, I think this is a great question for the panel, in fact. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the panel is going to say about what's working at cross-border points to help women in trade facilitation. But I can say that what we're looking at the policy level in the survey on things like women's representation in the trade facilitation committees, or a strategy that incorporates a gender dimension. But it could also be trainings, and some of the things that we've seen in the African region that have worked well are training for customs and border officials, special trade facilitation measures like trade information desks. And so, and these are not specifically targeted to women, including things like simplified trade regimes. They're not targeted specifically to women, but because women make up a big proportion of cross-border traders, it means that they're necessarily impacted by these measures. And so now just imagine if we were to design them with a gender dimension in mind, how much more effective they could be. And that's why I'm looking forward to what the panel is going to come up with. But I think maybe I'll leave it there, and we can see what the panel says, and if there's an opportunity, I'll come in at the end. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. Jan says that he helped design road border crossings. So I think maybe we could be able to exchange. You can put your email on the chat, and we can be able to engage you further to see what collaborations or areas that the panelists can be able to engage. I think I can't see any question. Do we have any question from the panelists from Nadia on the survey? Okay, I can't see any hand up, so I think we can move to the next speaker. And the next speaker is Aranzazu Sanchez Belastegui, Economic Affairs Officer, Trade Facilitation Section, Trade Logistics Branch, Division of Technology and Logistics at UNCTAD. Ara has 14 years of professional experience as a project manager and economic affairs in several positions in different private and public institutions. So I'd like to welcome you, Ara. And I know UNCTAD has been at the forefront in terms of championing trade facilitation. And we want to hear from the gender perspective some of the interventions that UNCTAD is doing, what are the lessons learned, best practices, and if we can be able to exchange in terms of what has worked and what has not worked. So welcome, Ara.
Thank you very much, Rose, for this opportunity. So my question to you is that what would you do to make a trade? Women cross-border traders risk navigating corrupt officials, outsmarting tricksters and thieves, and even crossing infested waters and other barriers to make their sales. To raise awareness on the importance of considering a gender perspective when implementing trade facilitation reforms in UNCTAD, we have created a course around this topic. Since last summer, we have delivered to 18 African countries, and I would like to share with you not only what participants learned from it, but also what I have learned from it, because I have learned a lot, and how it is going to change the way we work at UNCTAD in the future. So let me just, I'm going to share with you a very short video. Let me share my screen with you. There we go. So let me just stop sharing and continue. So I explained that this has been a learning journey, not only for our participants, but also for us in UNCTAD. With the testimonials of all the participants, we have learned a lot about best practices, as you were, as not just challenges, but also best practices, as you were mentioning, Rose. These are some of the things that we have learned and plan to act upon. If trading in Africa was a video game and each character a woman, the characters' encounters would go from bad to worse until the final stage, where they reach the big monster. In this case, it could be a thief, a corrupt official, or a law the traders didn't know about, or being asked to do something online when you don't even have a computer. You need to be a superhero to be a woman cross-border trader, to overcome each challenge and still generate an income and livelihood to support your family or even just survive. Exploring and understanding the real risks faced by women traders is crucial to identifying policies and processes which can lower or remove the barriers and support these barriers to become more prosperous and efficient in their work. So how concretely can we take this fearful reality and create policies that will indeed have positive effects in the woman's life? Following a suggestion from one of the participating countries, we have developed terms of reference for the establishment of a technical working group on gender, within each national trade facilitation committee. The activities of each technical working group will differ from country to country, but there are a couple of aspects that have been proven common to all these countries that the working group should start focusing on. In fact, a few months after we started with this initiative, we realized that we are not the pioneers on this. And in fact, Ghana has launched such a committee last month. So this is one of the best practices. So what should these kind of committees address in their work? And these are three key aspects I want to share with you. The first and most urgent thing to do is to transform the relationship of border agencies with women traders from hostile to friendly parties. The final assignments of participants into our course have revealed insufferable but widespread levels of gender-based violence across those countries, including coercion, extortion, discrimination, exploitation, as well as physical, verbal, and sexual harassment by border personnel. National trade facilitation committees have to urge the member agencies to put into place policies to identify, stop, and condemn such abuses. In 2018, the Uganda Revenue Authority launched the Women Traders Initiative with an intention to address challenges faced by women traders. Under this initiative, Uganda Revenue Authority established a desk at all 5 one-stop border posts dedicated to small-scale traders. This desk, is normally known as the champion for women and is to address any issue women can face at the border. And actually, there are issues related to these abuses and these issues that they have, but also related to the second point I'm going to talk about. The second most urgent matter is related to training and information sharing. Many of the abuses women traders suffer are due to the lack of information about their rights. So national trade facilitation committees should support trade facilitation initiatives that will enhance transparency of border procedures and train vulnerable traders about their rights. This is especially important in the context of a digitalization of processes in countries with a high rate of illiteracy and low access to new technologies. Many countries now are working on the trade information portals, like the example you have here in Rwanda. So they want to comply with the Article 1.2 of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. This is the opportunity to focus on the description of products that matter to women traders, for instance. We need to talk about involvement. National trade facilitation committees need to make sure women traders or associations are invited to participate in the development of trade facilitation reforms. Creating an open and inclusive dialogue with the direct representative of these women will help making such policies in place, mind their rights, and address the daily challenges. And following on Nadia's presentation, I wanted to show you, I wanted to show you actually our database of national trade facilitation committees. You can have access to aggregated data on what is the situation of women in national trade facilitation committees. So you can select for a specific grouping that you are interested. If you are interested in one particular country or group of countries, you can create your own grouping as well. Or you can just click on global. You can access information on many aspects of the national trade facilitation committees, in this case on the gender perspective. I want to share that around globally, 36% of members of the NTFCs are women. Women chair and co-chair 37% of the NTFCs. But only 14% of NTFCs mentioned that they have done anything to address gender. And the reasons, more is that it's not considered relevant at this stage. They have other issues. It's not considered a priority, and there is a lack of awareness. So there is a lot we still have to do on this regard. So to sum up, UNCTAD will enhance its work with national trade facilitation committees to prevent abuses on women traders, to raise awareness of women traders' needs, and to ensure that they get involved in the process of implementing trade facilitation reforms. Because we should not forget, women are catalysts of development. They have the potential to skyrocket progress for the benefit of the current and future generations. And if you like this topic, I would like to invite you all to our global forum beginning of February, where we will have a special session on gender and trade facilitation. So just go to unctad.org/tf and you will find all the information. Thank you very much, and over to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Ara. I want to surprise you. I was part of the course.
Very good. Yes, actually, your name rang a bell to me.
Yes. I undertook the course, and I want to vouch for it. It was an excellent course, and I also saw some of friends that I know, Alex Kanyamazulu, Job from KRA, who undertook the course, and also they felt that it really added quite a bit of value. And I think I want to congratulate UNCTAD for that. Personally, also, I was a chairperson of a subcommittee or National Trade Facilitation Committee in Kenya. And some of the issues that you have mentioned about lack of awareness, lack of prioritization of, of membership in terms of women at the National Trade Facilitation Committees is really, really a challenge that we have faced. And I can speak from a point of information in Kenya. And I'm happy that we have some really strong lessons that have been learned, especially in terms of drawing lessons that can be able to improve relationships between border officials and women traders, involving women associations in when you're making decisions regarding trade facilitation initiatives. So I think I'm really happy with the outcome of the course in terms of the feedback that you have gotten. And I think the 36% representation needs to go up. And I think what we've talked about, the interventions that UNCTAD is planning to do, we definitely, take these numbers up. So I think I just want to invite questions from panelists and also from the rest of the participants to Ara on this. I think we are really off to a good start in terms of best practices and also identifying what are the real issues are. So do we have any comments? Any questions to Ara? Yes, Candice, I see you have a question. Please go ahead and mute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Aranza, for the great presentation. It's maybe more of a comment, but I think it's so great that we're counting the representation of women in the National Trade Facilitation Committees. But I think even more important is to actually count the representation of women who are representing the private sector in the National Trade Facilitation Committee, because they're the ones, right, who are every day at the border understanding what the challenges are to trade, and it's their perspectives that I think we really need to have included. So that's just a comment that I want to make, and maybe to turn it into a question, would love to know if that's something else that UNCTAD would look to measure in the future.
Yes, Ara, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, please, thank you. Okay. So two things. So on this, actually, what we do systematically when we work with the countries is that if we notice that they don't have this kind of organizations as members, we insist on how important it is. We have also worked with certain countries where this organization does not exist at all, do not exist. So this is an issue. But I think, I mean, in general, there is so much to do. When I spoke about this learning journey, and this learning journey for me was really like, at the end of the course, all the students or participants, they had to write, about these issues. And what struck me is like, these are people that, normally work in capital, not much at the border, but they're involved in all this in the agencies. And they still, were able to describe all these challenges, all these issues with examples and all these abuses, and they're not even there, and they know this is happening. They know they're abused by people of their own organization as well. And for me, this was really like, okay, why aren't we doing something already now And I know, for example, the World Customs Organization, they have programs to ensure that there is a system where people can denounce directly to the commissioner if they any of these abuses. But really, like, what struck me is, like, you are in the capital, you are far away of the border, and you know already this is happening, and you know already this is a common thing. So we really as a National Trade Facilitation Committee have to do something for this, because this is really important to address.
Thank you so much, Candice, for that question. And I think that's a really good response, Ara, on that. Do we have any question before I can just give one more comment? I don't see a question in the chat. I just want to give one more comment, Ara. In terms of also, I think we also need to look at the National Trade Facilitation Committees in terms of their work plans. Because they're developing work plans. These members who are not very aware of prioritizing women issues are developing work plans. They are developing these, work plans for implementation of the trade facilitation agreement. So I think we also need to look at the second level of, yes, we have addressed the women issues. Now we need to look at it. Are those work plans, engendered? Are they, the strategies that have been put in place to achieve those articles, of the TFA? Are they looking, or are they, considering, the inequalities that are there in terms of, both genders? So I think that's my comment on that. I don't know if you want to respond to that before we can proceed to the next speaker.
Yeah, I think it's you are doing a really important point, and this is as you were part of the course. This is one of the aspects of the course, is going through several articles of the agreement and explaining how you can really change the story just by making a little twist when you implement that article. So we are not necessarily requesting you to do more, because right now, countries are so focused on the implementation of the agreement, and they feel, okay, this is the top of what we can do. There's so many things to address already, right? You could see it in the survey. They said it's not a priority right now. But what we want to, the message we want to convey is that if you are addressing these measures of the agreement just by adding a gender perspective to the implementation of the measures, you can make a huge difference. So this is what we are focusing, and the fact that we are working on this, on creating these technical working groups within the NTFCs on gender, is going to help on that.
Thank you so much, Ara, on that. I want to call upon the next our next speaker, and our next speaker is Candice White. And I just allow me to read her a brief biography of Candice. Candice works for the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, a joint initiative of the World Economic Forum and the International Chamber of Commerce and the Center for International Private Enterprise in partnership with GIZ. The Alliance helps to developing and least developed countries to implement trade facilitation agreements. She works on making Alliance projects inclusive of gender and small businesses. She holds HBA from Ives Business School in Western University of London. So thank you for honoring the invitation to be part of this, and I want to welcome you, Candice.
Thank you so much, Rose. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm just loading my presentation. I think hopefully now you can see it. Here we go. So as Rose has mentioned, I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our work in the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation and how we include gender into that work. And as we're laser focused on helping countries to implement the Trade Facilitation Agreement, our approach has really been around how do we mainstream gender into the work that we do. So I will focus a little bit more on kind of our approach and our lessons learned and good practices from our gender mainstreaming into trade facilitation. And so just to start off with a quick example, a quick definition to make sure we're all on the same page. So gender mainstreaming is really about integrating a gender perspective into each step of the program lifecycle, and the goal is to promote equality between women and men and to combat discrimination. And so what this means for the Alliance is that we're taking a gender kind of sensitive approach to our projects by doing several things. So consulting with women, conducting gender analysis, determining the potential gender effects, gender differentiated effects of our projects,
collecting data, and also measuring our impact. And as you can see on the kind of graph there, what this means is that we're not focused on kind of gender-targeted projects where we're working directly to build capacity for women-owned businesses, but rather focusing on how can we, within the kind of realm of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, all the different articles that we're implementing, how can we make sure that we're bringing that gender lens to what we do? And so I think there's some good kind of learnings for other projects in trade facilitation that will have a similar focus. And what we've done is we've built several tools to help us in this process of gender mainstreaming. The first one is the one on the left, which we published. So both of these are available on our website, tradefacilitation.org. The first one we published last year, which is around gender mainstreaming guidelines, which is essentially a look at our project process and how do we incorporate a gender lens, kind of what questions should you ask and should you answer, what data do you need to collect at each stage in developing a trade facilitation reform. And then the tool on the right, so I won't go into them in too much detail, that's why they're so small there on the screen, but just to share that this is the approach that we've taken, is basically to build these tools to help us and to help our project managers, and also to have them publicly available so that others working on trade facilitation can also use them. And so the tool on the right is basically an analysis of the Trade Facilitation Agreement that we've done through a gender lens. So we looked at what are those specific barriers to trade that women face versus men, and then what are some gender-sensitive actions you can take when you're implementing each article of the Trade Facilitation Agreement. So I encourage you to take a look at that online if you are working on implementing the TFA. So now to dive a little bit deeper into what this means for our projects and how do we incorporate this gender lens into each of the different stages. So I think regardless of if you're a development initiative or a policymaker or working in the National Trade Facilitation Committee, chances are you're doing some sort of scoping, design, and implementation of different trade facilitation initiatives. And there's some different items that you can do at different times, and that's sort of how we've, from a very high level, broken down our approach within the guidelines. So of course, you can always go look for more detail there. But there's certain things that you'll want to do kind of continuously throughout all of your trade facilitation initiatives. So the first thing there is about making sure you're conducting gender-sensitive and inclusive consultations. So what we've just talked about with Aranza and having women represented in the National Trade Facilitation Committee, this is a good example of making sure that the women's voices are represented there. But equally, it can also mean, if you have a project steering committee, that you have female representation on that you have women's associations that are being part and being able to give their input. And then in addition, kind of throughout the entire kind of work of trade facilitation as well, you want to ensure that we're collecting gender data, and especially that we're disaggregating that data and kind of analyzing what that means for women versus men in the project. During project scoping, what's important is conducting a gender analysis, so really understanding what are those different roles that women versus men hold in society, so both kind of as individuals, but also as business owners, as traders, and that will help us to have a better understanding of how will they be impacted by a particular trade facilitation reform. And then that will help you help to inform what activities you need to include as well in your project to ensure that it's implemented in a gender sensitive way. So between the design stage where you're kind of planning and deciding, okay, maybe we need to do some training for women or something else that's a little bit more kind of a targeted activity to ensure that they'll be able to benefit from this new information system or this new process or this electrification of a document. So that then leads you into making sure that during implementation, you're putting these gender activities that you had planned in place, and also that you're measuring your impact. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So over the last, let's say, a year and a half, the Alliance has been focused on implementing this approach, and that's allowed us to learn kind of a few different things, which I think I can share with the group, and hopefully it will help inform the work that you all do as well. So the first is about really applying a gender lens to everything you do. So we've tried to do this through the mainstreaming approach, but other organizations and agencies have had success in doing that through maybe having a gender champion or a gender focal point that is responsible for kind of putting that lens on everything. So depending on how your organization is set up, look at what makes the most sense for you. But I think this is the really important point, is that we are always kind of adding this lens to the work that we do, because that's the only way that we're going to make sure that that women don't get left out of the conversation. And the second, I think, is about really building capacity of your team. So I have it, you know, for your teams, but also for key, like, kind of external stakeholders as well, because sometimes there's an important mindset change that needs to take place, both internally, but also with external stakeholders, to understand the importance of gender, to understand that women face different challenges than men, and therefore that the trade facilitation reforms are not going to impact them in the same way, if there's not some kind of particular actions taken to ensure that they're both equally able to benefit. And so this could be, and I think Alina will talk about as well, the important gender sensitivity training that they're doing for customs agencies. So any kind of key stakeholders in trade facilitation to really build their knowledge and build their capacity to understand these issues and be able to implement is really important. The next point, I think, is also one that I would underline, put in bold, is really about having really strong partnerships with organizations or associations, or basically any stakeholders that can represent women's interests, because oftentimes women, you know, own businesses or women traders are small and they are resource strapped, and it's difficult to ask them to find the time to contribute to your reforms and making sure that they're going to be beneficial to them. But if you build strong partnerships and you support them, and then they also will support the reforms, then it's really a win-win for everyone. So I think we've found success by having strong partnerships with different women's entrepreneurship associations around the world. And then also very important to measure our impacts and disaggregate by gender when we can, because often we don't actually know the gravity of a problem until we have the data in front of us. And in a lot of cases, it can be quite simple. It might be as simple as, if you're tracking who are the licensed customs brokers in your country, having a field that also tracks gender, so that we're able to see, okay, maybe women are quite underrepresented in this industry, maybe this is a problem. Or even tracking, you know, for trusted traders or AEO programs, what is the gender of the business owner, so that we have a better picture of these items. And then lastly, it's not just about kind of having this data and disaggregating it, but also sharing it, because that will help us to inform. There's so many different actors, you know, internationally and regionally and locally working on trade facilitation, and making sure we have the right data available to inform our decision making is extremely important. So an ask for everyone, if they can, if they're collecting data, let's make sure we're working all together and doing things in women's best interest in order to share data that will help us to ensure trade facilitation will benefit them. So I will leave it there. I think I'm probably slightly over time. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you so much, Candice, on that. And I think the lessons learned are really well articulated in terms of, and I'm so happy that you are actually applying it. You know, it's not just lessons learned, but it's you're already incorporating it in terms of the programs that you have, and I believe this is something that we can be able to, you know, we can be able to share out, and we can be able to adopt also in terms of the different entities that are represented here, you know, applying a gender-based lens, building capacity, you know, leveraging on partnerships, measuring the impact, you know, always what is measured gets done. So, and also most importantly, sharing this data, because sometimes we collect so much, but we don't share it, and when you don't share it, then, you know, you lose the aspect of, you know, why even you're collecting it in the first place, you know. And if we share it, then we're able to see what are the areas that we can be able to intervene. And as development, you know, partners, we are working in, you know, in unity as opposed to everybody, you know, doing their own thing. So I want to ask for any questions from either panelists or participants for Candice. Any question? I cannot see a question in the chat. So if anybody has a question. So I think also because of time, I will move to our next panelist, who is Alina Festisova from International Trade Center. Allow me just to read a brief bio of Alina. Alina is a Trade Facilitation Program Officer in the Trade Facilitation team of International Trade Center. At ITC, she specializes in providing technical assistance in the area of trade facilitation, trade policy, and regulatory cooperation in Central Asia, Africa and South and East Asia. So Alina, welcome. We want to hear on the subject matter and any lessons learned, best practices. And I think I'm very interested to hear about the Ready for Trade project, which might be having some really good lessons for us. So welcome, Alina.
Thank you very much, Rose, for this kind introduction, and good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues and friends. Very happy to be here today, and would like, of course, to thank all regional commissions for this excellent event organization. Let me probably share my screen without further ado. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, it is visible. You can take it to slideshow.
Yes, perfect. Combining business and trade activities with family life is not an easy task, and I'm afraid that my personal life may be affected by that. This is one of the quotes we heard from women in Central Asia when we did the survey there. When we held trainings for rural women, it turned out that 80% of them are unaware of tools for their business support. This is another one we heard from Women Business Association in Central Asia. So challenges that women face in economic and trade activities are real, and we're very happy that in our Ready for Trade Central Asia project, which focuses on 5 Central Asian countries, we have a dedicated component on gender-responsive trade facilitation. When we just started this project, it was actually not easy for us to find concrete data on women engagement in trade in Central Asia. And when we surveyed more than 1,500 women across the region, we found some very interesting data which was not before available for that region. For example, 62% of women engage in trade to supplement family income while keeping their working time flexible. Only 50% of women told us that they find information on official border regulations and procedures easy to understand. And only 35% of women report receiving some training on trade and business skills, which is actually crucial for their confidence to participate in trade activities. And then 65% of government entities told us that they don't collect any gender-segregated data on women trading activity. Now, these challenges, of course, may be applied not only to Central Asia, but also to other regions. But I think some very important finding and lesson learned is that constraints in gender and trade facilitation differ a lot depending on the regions. For example, when we worked in West Africa with informal cross-border traders, main preoccupations that they faced were connected with lack of physical security at the border, or poor infrastructure facilities, or greater difficulty of women in accessing transport infrastructure as well. However, in Central Asia, the picture is not exactly the same, where, for example, the lack of data, information, or women engagement in trade is primary concern, whereas in Africa, there is actually a lot of data about informal cross-border traders. Limited women participation in trade in Central Asia, another concern, which is different from the one in Africa. Then, of course, there are some very common concerns like lack of access to information. But what I would like to say with that is there is not one fit-for-all approach to gender and trade, and constraints that women face and assessments that we apply as development partners in our projects have been really tailor-made to the region and take into account the specificities to devise really good solutions. And we're happy that as ITC, we're already implementing some of those gender-sensitive solutions across different regions. We already heard today, I think in the first session of SMEs, and we heard from colleagues in UNCTAD, the importance of transparency and ease of access to information to women. And for that, of course, there are trade facilitation portals available. Then, of course, we should always remember about the simplified trade regimes for small-scale cross-border traders, including women, which again, for them, they provide specific area where they feel more safe, where they feel more at ease to approach the trade information offices that are there at the border for them. So this is something that we're doing in Africa, specifically at the border between Niger and Nigeria, to support women traders in crossing the borders. Then you can't forget about their policy level solutions. We talked today about incorporating gender aspects in trade facilitation reforms, but also we need to think about institutional practices, such as gender focal points, organizing women's staff network, amending code of conduct of customs and other agencies where necessary. And of course, we as ATC will also focus on providing step-by-step guidance to national trade facilitation committees and other institutions on increasing women representation. So then, of course, apart from this policy level access to information, it's important to create a conducive border environment for women at the border. And we do this through 3 pillars. First of all, we sensitize border officials on how to make trade gender inclusive. And here we're working directly with customs agencies, training their staff as trainers on these courses, so then they can deliver it to their colleagues in the regions and in the capital. And we already trained more than 600 border officials in 5 Central Asian countries. And very importantly, further, these customs administrations, they internalize this course and make this part of their customs training program. So it's really sustainable from that perspective. We also provide trainings on gender disaggregated data collection for trade policy making for statistics agencies, because this data is crucial for monitoring women engagement in trade. And I think we also talked about this today. We develop recommendations for gender sensitive infrastructure at the border, where again, the needs are quite different depending on the region. And last, but definitely not least here, we also need to work directly with women traders to build their confidence, to build their capacity to engage in trade activities, to access markets. And we do this through a variety of trainings on commercial negotiations, on understanding of export-import procedures, on understanding how they should behave at the border, what rights they have in front of the customs official. And of course, apart from this basis, we provide some direct training on women export management skills, where we do one-by-one coaching for women, so they know how to do their trading business in order to get the maximum income out of it, in order to avoid the challenges that they may face at the border. So something probably I would like to say to close that, and just to make sure we're all aligned when we do different trade facilitation project with a gender lens. We need to tailor-make our solutions, and we need to take into account the interest of women traders, of business community, and of customs officials as well. And when these interests are aligned, when these actors have common position to gender, then the results that we will achieve are much more likely to be sustainable, are much more likely to be gender inclusive. And apart from this, understanding the country peculiarity when it comes to social, cultural, and other differences is crucial to make any gender offer sensitive and important for the country. I had a small showcase video. I think for the interest of time, probably I'm not going to show it right now. I will provide the link to the organizers so that you can see it, where our beneficiaries here from Tajikistan speak from different perspectives of traders, associations, and government officials, how they perceive these trainings. So like this, you can have a look at this later. But with that, thank you very much for your attention. And of course, we'll be very happy to take your questions later on. Thank you very much, and over to Rose.
Okay, thank you so much, Alina, for that. And I think a lot of what you've said has really complemented what the previous speakers have mentioned. So we can already see that we are all working towards, same. Our findings are almost very similar, and also we are working towards the same thing. That is ensuring that trade facilitation initiatives are taking into concern the gender differences. So I can see a question here from Jan. He says, yes, women drive trucks in Central Asia. They need separate lanes inside the terminals. Do you want to comment on that?
Thank you very much, Jan, for this comment. And I think this again shows how important it is in each country context to see what can be done for women. On the one hand, of course, we don't want to have any discrimination towards men, and any measure that we put, such as, for example, separate gender lanes in the terminal, should be well weighted and should be discussed probably in the National Facilitation Committee before any decision is taken. But I think it's an excellent idea and point probably to bring in for regional discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alina, for that. Martin, you have a question? You can unmute yourself and ask a question. Martin from Rwanda.
Yes, thank you, Rose. First of all, I want to appreciate Alina's presentation. In particular, I know the one point of really kind of institutions or countries building gender inclusive infrastructure at border crossings or to trade, trade centers across borders. That's a very important point, and we want to also to recommend that, and maybe also to request that to suggest that organizations like ITC could really play a very big role in maybe supporting these initiatives. For example, building border infrastructure that really are quite gender sensitive, maybe catering to women, breastfeeding, and so on. This is something that I feel ITC can really play a very big role in across their networks or partnerships across countries. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Martin. Alina?
Thank you so much, Martin, for this comment. And indeed, I think as ITC, we're trying to move into that direction more and more, working, for example, with informal cross-border traders and with associations and trying to see with them what kind of infrastructure they require. And of course, a big part of those traders are women. And some of these trade information desks that we established as part of the infrastructure, and I think my colleague Pierre before was even showing the photo of how one of these centers look, is one of these priority areas that we're looking at. And of course, I think you also very rightly mentioned other type of infrastructure, which is definitely essential for women. For example, maybe changing facilities with lighting at the border, the changing rooms, even separate toilets for women and men, and sometimes the surveillance cameras and all these kind of things, when they can be integrated and when we can do it through our projects, of course, we will be doing that. Thank you very much for your comment again.
Thank you so much, Alina, for that. And I think this is just right on time. I would like to invite Gloria Atuhire from Trademark East Africa. And Trademark is doing quite a bit in terms of facilitating women at the border. And I just want to welcome her. I think this is just right on time of what the interventions that Martin has asked about. And she can be able to give us the experiences of Trademark East Africa. So welcome. Gloria, you're welcome.
Thank you, Rose. Allow me just to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, your screen is visible, Gloria. You may go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I just thought I would share a bit more in the context of COVID. And the reason why I thought this was important is because, as we all know, that when COVID came into play, in a way, it showed us what was working and what wasn't. And obviously the disparities kind of were more enhanced in terms of gender. And so I thought it would be important to base also this conversation around the whole COVID issue. I mean, Trademark undertook a survey last year between April and June, just to see what was happening particularly with cross-border traders. And the reason why, again, this is important is because of the demographic, just the sheer number of women who are involved in cross-border trade. And I think many may be aware of the kind of findings that came through, not just through the Trademark study, but through various studies that were done. One of them was just the impact of the border closure. Most of these traders said just the fact that the border was closed, borders were closed almost suddenly, almost overnight, was one of the biggest impacts that they experienced. And the reason for this is quite simple, is that firstly, many of them trade informally. So it's like a daily thing, probably 2-3 times a day. You cross, you purchase something, you come and sell, or the other way around. So the kind of nature of the trade, once the borders were closed, I mean, everything came to a standstill. Secondly, is because many of these, who are primarily women, trade in perishable commodities. So once again, they couldn't access the markets immediately. I mean, it was just crisis mode. And so this was kind of what came through. The economic impacts, I think, have been well documented. This particular case was a group of women in Busia, which is the border between Uganda and Kenya, where people experienced, women traders experienced almost 90% of their profits eroded in a space of about 2-3 months, which of course is very significant. And then again, when governments of course took different measures to respond to try and address this crisis, but the cost of trade went up very significantly. COVID tests, long processes for clearance, truck drivers having to go through tests on either side of the border. All these things really pushed up the cost of doing business in the region. So one of the things Trademark did in support with our different partners and donors was to design what we called a Safe Trade Emergency Facility, which was really trying to get trade back going. To get trade going again after that disruption. This has been a long drawn. Nobody thought we would still be talking about COVID 2 years on, but there was need to quickly respond and see how to get, trade getting back in the region, especially because of the livelihoods at risk as a result of the shutdown across the region. One of the things that was very evident was just how poor our infrastructure is. This is something we all know. Markets are typically very crowded places in East Africa, particularly, no storage, no cold facilities. But during the crisis last year, this became even more evident. So one of the things we did was to develop what we call safe trade zones. This was really just getting into the infrastructure and trying to make it more conducive for trade to continue without putting either the people in the market, the sellers or the buyers, or even other suppliers in the market, in the value chain, at risk. So it involved training, obviously, sensitization around the protocols that most of the governments had put in place, but also trying to improve the infrastructure itself to make it safe for the women to keep trading. So we've done this at 2 borders so far. That is ongoing at Busia, but completed at Togwajale, which is the border between Ethiopia and Somaliland, and then ongoing at Nimule border, which is in South Sudan. Another thing linked to that was really to try and build back the market linkages. Obviously, people couldn't reach the market, or the market couldn't reach them, whichever way you look at it. And so there was need for someone to come into that space and try and bridge this gap again. So Trademark did a lot of that, working through partners like True Trade, which is really a market facilitator, who were able to connect, farmers and the markets. And this project is still ongoing in Kenya and targeting about 2,000 producers. The simplified trading regime has been mentioned severally by previous speakers. I think for me, there was a test on this because, as we all know, when the governments responded to the crisis, the initial focus was on formal big traders, truck owners, big trailers moving across the region, and the small traders did not feature anywhere in the conversation. And so for me, the question that came up was, is the simplified trading regime really fit for purpose in a crisis? Because it's like it was almost made redundant. Obviously, there were different reasons for why this happened, but I think there was room, particularly in East Africa, for governments to have put in place some kind of transition framework that would help trade to keep going, primarily because a lot of livelihoods depend on this cross-border trade. There are thousands of people who cross our borders daily, so for them to be cut off was really a crisis. The issue of representation has been mentioned quite a bit. A lot of these conversations, there were no women traders. They could have been women, but not necessarily the voice of women traders in some of these conversations. When they were trying to say, okay, how do we reopen borders? How do we keep people safe in the course of trade? The voices of women were really not coming through. So one of the things we did, of course, we always work with women associations, and we were able to. In fact, interestingly, many of the women associations were the ones who were rallying around with their different local leaders to resolve some of the issues that they were facing. I'll give an example in Busia. In Busia, one of the markets was closed. I think it's called Sophia Market. And the women are the ones who the association are the ones who went to the leadership and said, we need a space to trade. You've closed the market for health reasons, but everybody is stranded. And through that kind of negotiation and advocacy, they were able to be given a different space, at least temporarily, to engage in trade. And so this capacity building is something that has to continue to strengthen these associations, strengthen their voice, and be able to engage not just in the policy space, but also in market and market access issues. The issue of the cooperatives and the collective collective market, the evidence was quite significant during the time of COVID, that people who were in associations were able to survive better, or to survive compared to those who are not. This was particularly evident in Rwanda, which of course has a very strong and very well organized cooperative movement. And the women were able to support each other, not just economically, but also socially, because as we know, that there was also very difficult emotional issues and social issues to do with gender-based violence and the like. So the women who were in cooperatives were just more, they were better equipped to survive or to make it through the time of COVID compared to those who are not. But also, as I said, to have their voices heard and get into some of the conversations that were taking place. One of the big things that I think has been mentioned again by several people for me was the coordination and partnerships. During this time, I think it was evident that nobody could solve the issue alone. There was no one party, not a government, not a regional body. Everybody had to come together. And so for trademark partnerships and coordination was at the center of our response on safe trade. We got into partnerships with people like AMREF, who ordinarily would not consider partners, but because of the issues of health and safety, that was a critical partner for us. World Food Program was critical in providing places where testing, they provided tents for testing for drivers, but also they were able to help in the movement of PPEs across the borders. The WFP played a great role in partnership with Trademark to do that. I'm sure people may have heard about KEPSA, and it's actually ongoing now, KEPSA and their engagement around driver vaccination in Kenya. So those kind of partnerships that really people had to pull together, just to keep the whole ecosystem working. One big thing that came up was the issue of financing. I recall having a conversation with one of the women traders sometime in June last year, and she's like, Gloria, right now what I need is money in my pocket. I need to feed my family. So information is great and all these other things you're giving, PPEs and all that, but it was a crisis. And so there was need to respond in that sense. So we also had to partner with the Financial Sector Deepening Project in Kenya to provide cash transfers. And this has been done for over 2,000 women in Busia. That's also an ongoing project. In terms of broadly, this is more broad, in a more broad context, what has worked well from the program that we run at Trademark. We've been able to get women in the joint border committees. The joint border committees are really a group of the different stakeholders who keep the operations at the different borders going. So we have women represented in 8 different committees. Of course, that's still a small number, but it's a great start. And these women, of course, they are trained, they are empowered to be able to speak, to be able to articulate what the issues are, and basically influence the practice in that location. The issue of gender champions, I think, has been raised by different speakers. URA is a good is a good one on this. They've put people in place, officials, customs officials who are really gender champions and who are there at the borders to help women be able to confidently and comfortably utilize the border infrastructure. I've already spoken about cooperatives, capacity building, formalization. What happened during the lockdown, many of the women resorted back to what we call the panya routes. So they got off the main course because the borders were closed anyway, but trade had to continue. So many of them were using informal routes, the rivers, whatever back routes. And so this capacity building, again, is an ongoing thing, but more so the crisis showed, there has to be a response that supports women, and there's more incentive to go through a formal border crossing than to go through a back route. Again, sensitization to border officials has been mentioned by the different speakers. Trademark has done this continuously. It's part of our long-term programming, just to build the trust. Trust is a very big issue when it comes to trade facilitation, because one, there's the supply and the demand side. So people have to be able to build trust and, dialogue and cooperation around particularly border management. We've established resource centers. These are different people call these different things, but it's really a place to get information. So Trademark has 11 of these centers, and we get an average of 300 women coming in. And during the lockdown, actually, the centers played a really critical role because they became a go-to place because everybody did not know what to do. It was like, what happens now? So the resource centers really became very critical because they are right there at the border. So people who are in that locality can access them. And also in terms of supplies of PPEs and things like that, they played a critical role in that sense. Data has been mentioned. One of the things we tried to do during the lockdown was to get into a partnership, I recall, with Jumia, because we're trying to see how do we get some of the commodities that women are trading onto these online platforms. But there was very little data to work with. We couldn't quite tell where these women are. We couldn't quite tell what volumes they had. We couldn't quite tell what stock they had at that point in time. And so that partnership did not really work very well. So one of the things Trademark has done is to build a database of traders. It's ongoing, obviously. So far, we have about 8,000 records, just to tell us where are these women, what are they doing, what's the nature of the trade that they're in, so that you're able to use this data, both for policy, but also for programming and obviously trading purposes. And we also did the similar exercise for women SMEs. And so far, we've been able to document and profile 540 SMEs. And the purpose of this is really, again, to be able to build market access for these women, to help them rebuild their businesses. In terms of, I think the recommendations that we have, or maybe they're lessons, but I think what still needs to be done is this health issue. I think a couple of lessons have been learned from that, but there's need to really look in the long term. How do traders, and women in particular, how can we integrate that into the wider trade facilitation network? So that if another shock came up, how are the small traders in a way buffered or cushioned against that? The issue of the disruption of the global value chain is well documented. So are we ready? Are we ready to really trade as a region? Is the trade facilitation mechanism, strong enough to support in the sense of the AFCFTA? Data has been spoken about. Partnerships, I think we definitely have to build more of this if we're going to really support recovery and resilience in the trade system. The STR, the Simplified Trading Regime, I think there's need to have conversations around this. Not just because of the crisis that COVID brought into the region, but maybe more broadly, just to see, is this really effective, especially as we go into the continental space? Is the STR, for example, for the ESC fit for purpose if you move to a continental level? These are conversations we need to have. And then the link between the joint border committees and the national trade facilitation. I think a lot of people have talked about the trade facilitation committees, which is great, but there's a disconnect. So things may be working well at the center, maybe working well at the border, but they are not really speaking to each other. So there's need to just bridge that gap. So that's it for me, Rose. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Yes, I know your presentation was pretty long, but I think it was very interesting, and I believe each one of us has been able to pick some really good, some really good insights on what Trademark East Africa has found at the borders, at the East African borders. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway from your presentation is the link between joint border committees and national trade facilitation committees, because you find that national trade facilitation committees have officials and private sector representatives who are mostly at the capital. Then you have the joint border committees. So that coordination, I think, sometimes is not very seamless, and I think might need to be strengthened. So because of time, I want to move to my next speaker, and then we'll take questions after we are done with the other three speakers who are coming up. Excuse me. Our next speaker is Mr. Sydney Chibabuka. He's a Commissioner of Customs Services at the Zambia Revenue Authority. He was appointed as a commissioner in 2017, a position that he holds to date. His specializations and areas of interest include border management, trade and transport facilitation, modernization of customs operations, and promoting regional integration. So customs, if you look at the trade facilitation agreement, 90% of that is to do with customs. So I think it's really, really important that, we hear from the ground, and the successes that have been mentioned in terms of implementation, especially when it comes to trade facilitation initiatives touching on women. So welcome, Sydney. We are happy to have you, and you can go ahead.
Thank you, Rose, and greetings to all the participants that have logged into this webinar. I want to thank you in particular and your colleagues for organizing this great initiative. I want to start from the premise that the generic trade facilitation initiatives measures are gender neutral. So until we take a step backwards and look at the special needs of women, we'll always take the needs of the women for granted. So speaking from our experience in Zambia, our statistics and the engagements with cross-border traders show that women tend to be more ignorant, with all due respect, about the available trade facilitation measures, as well as incentives that are available, and therefore are often likely to fall victim to fraudsters, or are less likely to take advantage of the available incentives, as has been mentioned by other presenters. So at the Zambian borders, particularly with the COMESA member states, such as Malawi, Zimbabwe, the DRC, and working in conjunction with COMESA, as well as cross-border associations. As Zambia Revenue Authority, we have established information trade desks to provide information instantly. The information that we provide includes eligibility for preferential treatment, HS classification, origin criteria, value thresholds, and any other technical information that women traders may need. In addition, Rose, we've established what we call custom experience desks at all our major border crossings. These custom experience desks are designed to assist taxpayers with tax information as well as information on border procedures. But maybe the difference with these desks is that deliberately, we have advised our officers that are manning these desks to give priority to women traders. So we have dedicated training for customer experience officers that covers all tax types as well as border procedures before we deploy them to these work areas. In addition, as ZRA, we have observed, and these observations have revealed that most women that venture into cross-border trade tend to be single, widowed, or from women-led households. Consequently, we deliberately endeavor to process their declarations expeditiously so that we do not unnecessarily keep them long at borders due to their vulnerability to other social vices. And then I would also want to share with all the participants here that as Zambia Revenue Authority, we are working in partnership with Global Alliance for Trade. I think one of the presenters here is from Global Alliance. And we have a project where we are developing an accreditation system for customs clearing agents in Zambia. And under this project, we are also deliberately encouraging women to register for accreditation. To assist women come on board, we have a scholarship arrangement So even when they don't have enough funds to enroll, to register for this program, if they have sufficient interest, and we are encouraging a lot of them to come on board, the scholarship is available. We remain confident that a critical mass of highly skilled customs brokers that are women will go a long way in driving the implementation of trade facilitation measures that are also designed to help fellow women traders. So I think it will be easier for women brokers to have conversations around trade facilitation with fellow women traders as opposed to woman to man arrangements. Then also of interest for this discussion today, we are working in collaboration with the WCO, where we have a project to raise the number of women in leadership positions at the Zambia Revenue Authority. Again, we firmly believe that having well-skilled professional women in customs leadership, as well as in tax administration in general, at executive levels, these women will be better placed to understand and champion the trade facilitation agenda for women. To this end, recently, this group of women from Zambia Revenue Authority, led by the Commissioner of Finance, as well as the Deputy Commissioner in Customs, organized a trade and tax sensitization workshop for women in business, at which women from a cross-section of society that are interested in trade matters pitched up and had several questions on either tax filing related issues, trade procedures at the borders, and even how to access concessions as well as incentives. And we found this forum to have been very useful for our women. So again, there are several trade facilitation measures that we are implementing as a country, but I thought I should narrow my discussion to the issues that I've talked to because of the deliberate intervention that we have to help women in particular. So thank you very much for now. I'll end here and back to you.
Thank you so much, Sydney. I think you've really brought out something that I've had on the back of my mind for some time, whereby you find in the international trade value chain, the majority of the actors, the majority of those involved are actually men. So, and I think this predispositions some of these cross-border women traders to some of the vices and some of the challenges that they experience. So the recommendation and the interventions that you've mentioned that Zambia Revenue Authority is doing to increase the number of clearing and forwarding agents and also raise the number of women in leadership positions, I think these are indeed like really good, best practices that can, be emulated by other countries to just ensure that we are facilitating women. So I don't want to take a question because of time. We will take all the questions at the end, but I'm sure we have quite a number of questions for Sydney. I can already see some questions on the chat. We'll take them after we're done with the speakers. So I want to invite next Martin Gasasira from Rwanda Development Board and to just give his experience in terms of trade facilitation and Rwanda. We know Rwanda is one of the countries that really is at the forefront of championing gender equality, and I think is one of the few countries that have equal representation of women and men in their parliament. So we want to see if this has trickled down to trade. So welcome, Martin. You can present your presentation if you have it.
Thank you, Rose. I'll try to share my screen.
So for the other speakers, you can check the chat and see if there's a question for you, you can answer them directly. I see Gloria has done that. So for the interest of time, you can check on the chat, the panelists can check on the chat and respond to the questions.
How do I screen? I don't know what's wrong.
You're unable to share your screen? Can you hear us, Martin? Can you hear us, Martin? Okay, allow me to go to the next speaker as Martin is trying to sort out the technical issue. We have Evelyn Obidike from Nigeria Export Promotion Council. And just allow me to read a short bio on Evelyn. She's a female international trade expert with priority in non-oil exports development, business coach for SME startups and women with over 2 decades of in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in non-oil export strategy development, policy formulation, implementation, supply chain management, value addition, export development, and promotion of value chains. So we know that Nigeria is one of the biggest economies in Africa, and it will be very interesting to understand some of the interventions that specifically aiding women in trade facilitation. So you're welcome, Evelyn. You can proceed.
Thank you very much, Rose, and thank you for having me, everybody, and the fellow panelists. The issue we have behind us is very, very important. Very, very important because women, we must get it right. And the border is very, very important. Whether it's land border, whether it's sea border, whether it's air border, it is important. So I've listened to other panelists. I just want to look at a very, very critical, what are the best practices, what we have done. There's no need reinventing the wheel. We look at costs.
Evelyn, allow me to Evelyn, just limit yourself to 7 minutes. Just want to remind you that. Yes. Apologies for interruption.
Yes. Yes, 7 minutes. Are you sharing my slide or you want me to share my slide?
I think Alina, had you already shared your slide with Alina? Yes, yes. Is that your slide?
Yes, that's my slide.
Yes, you can proceed.
Yes. So the important thing is, why do women, what is the structure? The structure is that most women businesses are small. We have the small, we have the medium, and then most of them go informal because of cost, because of lack of knowledge, because there is no infrastructure. So the best practice there is mainstream the women, bring them in, and how do we do that? We sensitize them. You can make more profit. You can, if you organize very well, you can even have access to finance from the bank. So we sensitize them, we educate them, we train them, we identify them and bring them in. Another thing, the next slide, please. Next slide, yes. And what do we also do? How we get this thing done is that we do an analysis, we assess, and when we identify them, we have a database on them, and then we assess them. We conduct an audit. That audit will show the gaps, where they have gap on information, gap on product conformation, product competence, product quality, and then market. We cannot do it alone. We bring in the regulatory agencies. Like you can see in the slide, we have identified women that are interested in exporting under AGOA. Exporting under AGOA, and then we have brought in the West African Trade Hub. We have also brought in the Nigerian Customs. Customs look at the product. Customs give the information, and the Trade Hub gives them eligibility. So that information, the fear of information gap is removed. So that is a very major thing. Get involved, get partnership, and then give them the right information, mainstream them. Please, the next one. Next slide. We also see that capacity building is very clear. Gone are the days you just start, you continue giving. Gone are the days you continue just training women. No. What we do these days is coaching and mentoring. We pair up these women with our TPOs, Nigerian Export Promotion Council. We have roughly 33 offices all around the nation. So we pair up, we register these women. Meanwhile, our registration is make it very, very easy. They can register. They will pay on for the registration through the remitter, and they print the certificate right from the comfort of their rooms. So we pay them coaching and mentoring. The mentor finds out what is the problem. The mentor finds out what is the next step. Does the woman need certification? Does the woman need to be trained on documentation? So this has helped us. It's a best practice rather than just you give a free seminar, free workshop, they go home, there is no time to read, the mentor checks on them, and where we go. Please, next slide. Another thing why the women, next please, this is an example of what we have done. Particularly in Nigeria, we have a lot of women into shea butter and into cashew. This is a success story. It shows the value chain. It was the intervention. The women ordinarily do informal trading of raw cashew nuts, RCN, that gives them little or no money. But we intervene, NEPC intervene, and we were able to show them the right way. We intervene by donating some of those processing machines. Now they have value addition, and you can also see how that in terms of quality wise, in terms of food safety, you can see how they are clothed. You can see how every one of them are. And then what else are we talking about? African Continental Free Trade is just around the corner. Next slide. Just around the corner. Next slide, please. The fear each woman is having is, show me the way. How do I get this documentation? Rule of origin. What about the logistics? What is expected of me? Which product? And that is why we partnered with the Afrasian Bank and also the ITC. And you can see from the scribe, from the slides there, real hands-on training taking place, showing the women what to do, because logistics, documentation is key. When you have built their confidence, like the former panelist said from Kenya, Gloria, when the women are confident, they will be able to do it the formal way. And you can see Rose there training the women. It's a coincidence that today Rose is also training the women. She did very excellent job. Now the women are ready to go. Education is key. And also show them the way, show them the practical, bring in the forms, let them get used to the forms. But one important thing that Nigerian Export Promotion Council did is what we called establishment of trade houses. If you establish trade houses, we have started that of Togo. It hasn't commenced, but a lot has gone in there, a lot of resources. When you have trade houses there, the women can combine, they can do what they combine their exports together, and then the cost of logistics reduce, and they do a joint. The products are stored in that trade house for visibility, for accessibility, and for simplification. That also, NEPC is doing what we call the domestic export warehouse. Domestic export warehouse is whereby the products are brought before shipping, and they do a joint examination. And then the product the packaging is there, done there, the packaging, everything that needs to be done. And once it is stocked in a container and it is sealed, maybe from an inland container, because Nigeria is a very big place, that container will not be open until it gets to the destination. So in that case, cost is reduced, and there is a bit of efficiency, a bit of transparency. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We identified that partners are very, very important. We have NEPC has a success story with ITC and the Commonwealth in terms of promoting women, especially during the COVID. The ITC was able to train the women on e-commerce, and we were able to assist them to have a web presence. Many of them could not, facilitate their trade face to face. So web presence was very, very important. Now they can trade on the web, through the web. Now they can they sell their products and they also get the profit. So these are some of the ways. Of course, GIZ played a very important part in getting some of the women to be HACCP certified. DRC, Organic, ISO, and Fair Trade. You can see other partners we have, and you can see that picture, it tells it all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for that, and I'm so happy that that you have presented what Nigeria is doing. And sometimes we really overlook the role of export promotion agencies, especially when it comes to cross-border women traders. And I think we need to incorporate that in our trade facilitation initiatives. I know time is not on our side. I don't know if Martin is ready. We have Martin and we have Minal, our two last speakers. And we'll be taking questions on email because of time. So Martin, are you ready? And Anissa, you confirm if you've gotten Martin's presentation? Yes.
Okay.
So Martin, you can proceed, and please.
Side, can you see?
Yes. And okay. Martin, let's be very brief. Time is not on our side. Yes.
Thank you, Rose. Yes. Okay. Yes. Now, as you know very well, Rwanda is one of the champions of gender mainstreaming, and trade has been at the forefront of raising, of really developing our women. So trade actually, if you know our National Trade Facilitation Committee, almost 50% of this committee actually is made up of women. So even in our national development after genocide, women has been at the forefront. And you know very well that we're one of the champions really of gender equality. So women owned enterprises in Rwanda play a very vital role in inspiring economic development in Rwanda. Today, in 2018, the last labor force survey, women formed about 44.8%, as you can see, of our labor force. So they really form a very big part of our development journey. Okay, so women have been considered in our overall development strategy, especially considering our trade, also our investment in different sectors. Just somebody mentioned there, they are really very active in sectors like agro-processing, construction, meat and dairy, leather. Those sectors mentioned there, we have women and old entrepreneurs that are really playing a very, very big role in both trade and investment. Okay, so just to mention briefly some of our activities where we have been, the areas where we have been, as RDB, Rwanda Development Board, we've been trying to facilitate women in particular, women owned enterprises, just also many owned enterprises. But these activities, all this, we consider women also in a special way. First, we facilitate women in cross-border trade because they form the biggest part of our cross-border traders. Our main border post, which being Rwanda and DRC, we have about, actually, they say it's one of the, is the second busiest border in the world after Mexico border with US in terms of trade. we have very, very big, very large groups of women that are doing trade across borders between Rwanda and DRC. And there are committees that are in place to facilitate this trade. The government of Rwanda, through the Ministry of Trade and Industry, have built trade-related facilitation infrastructure, including cross-border markets. They are built in the side of Rwanda for this trade, and they are related infrastructure to help women in particular. Okay, then export coaching. Export coaching, we do coach our women together with other enterprises, but women-owned enterprises form a very big part of the enterprise that we, or SMEs that we do conduct export coaching, especially during international trade. Of recent, we've been embarking on training them preparing them for the SFTA, for the continental market. And yes, I think, Rose, remember you were here, I think it was in early October, where we were conducting export coaching. You saw how we really had a very big contingent of women enterprises. So training, capacity building has been also a very big part of the activities we do for women as RDB. We also do partnerships. We do partnerships with actual international organizations like the International Trade Center, where we have trained about more than 100 women in trade-related matters. For example, yes, through export coaching, where we partner sometimes with ITC, but also, yes, we also had another program called the Access Program. In the Access Program, I think we trained more than 60 women for cross-border trade and trade in general. Then we also do certification support services. We kind of cover 50% as RDB. We have agreements with the Rwanda Standards Board, which also has agreements with other certification bodies, where we do combine resources and support enterprises, in particular women enterprises, where we help them to kind of get certificates that allow them to do international trade. And then was a very important activity is the support in terms of e-commerce. As RDB, we have a very big program of supporting e-commerce enterprises. And one of our observations is that majority of the enterprises that are really succeeding in e-commerce are women-owned. We have some women-owned portals that are doing e-commerce trade, like there's one called Hey Enterprise. This is owned by a woman. It's one of the biggest. And by the way, these women-owned enterprises played a very big role in trade during the COVID lockdowns. They were really supplying products door to door. That was also another chance for them to really grow, blessing in disguise. But e-commerce is really picking up in Rwanda, and we are seeing that majority of the enterprises that are really doing well are women-owned enterprises in terms of e-commerce.
You should be winding up, Martin.
Yes, yes, I'm winding up actually. Then finally, it's the market linkages. We do support them to access markets through trade fairs, missions.
I think we've lost you, Martin. Can anybody hear Martin?
No, I cannot.
Yeah, Martin, can you hear us? I think we've lost you. Okay, I think we'll be able to proceed because of time. We are now I know there's so much to discuss and there's so much on this topic. I'm happy we've gotten like quite a number of panelists who have really contributed, heavily on this. And I just want to say, last but not least, we have Minal Munshey, and she's a lawyer and a criminologist. She's a regional consultant on gender equality at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. She's also a PhD candidate in criminology at the University of Cambridge, where her research focuses on access to justice in case of intimate partner violence in Lebanon. So welcome, Minal. Let us hear your presentation.
Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you, everyone who stayed for this long. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to be presenting some data from the Arab region and some experiences from the Arab region. So essentially, the premise really is that no country can achieve its economic potential or meet the challenges of the 21st century without the full and equal participation of women and men. Generally, trade facilitation measures are perceived to be non-discriminatory, but of course they do have and they may have gendered impact, but there is a lack of understanding of that. So ensuring that women can equally participate in international trade is especially important to improve economic outcomes, to increase resilience, and especially in the context of COVID, to build back better. I think we have to see trade facilitation and specifically women in trade facilitation within the larger kind of context of the gender gap in the region. So according to the World Economic Forum, there is a 40% gender gap in the region, and that is the largest gender gap actually in the world. Some of the lowest performing economies in the world are in the region, and in terms of economic participation and opportunity, the gap is 40.9%, which is the second lowest among all regions. And this is really attributed to two things. One is the low level of women's labor force participation, and two is the lack of access to financial assets. So this also impacts women's ability to then participate in trade facilitation. Specifically in terms of political empowerment, you don't see a lot of women in parliament or in ministries or in leadership positions, and that also then impacts women in terms of trade. At this rate, progress is slow, and it will take 142.4 years to close the gender gap. It's also important to understand the overall implementation of trade facilitation in the region. So countries are taking significant steps in order to improve trade facilitation. However, the progress is quite varied. So we see the overall implementation rate is at 54%. Saudi Arabia is the biggest performer with the overall implementation of 85%. And then we have Morocco, Bahrain, Tunisia. These countries have embarked on a series of serious reform. However, other countries, so for example, countries in conflict or least developed countries are still lagging behind. And a lot of that could be due to the conflict or due to occupation that many countries face in the region. Specifically in terms of women in trade facilitation, these are results from the Global Survey on Digital and Sustainable Trade Facilitation, the UN Global Survey that we've heard about previously. And in terms of this, I think it's an ongoing process in terms of progress. We can again see that there is low implementation, but some countries, for example, Saudi Arabia has made significant progress, whereas others are at 0% implementation rates. So these are symptomatic of larger gender inequality in the region and also the other challenges of implementing trade facilitation measures in the region. If we view the results by a region, the overall implementation rate in terms of women in trade facilitation is at about 35% overall. This is much higher for the GCC countries, so that includes Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, but it's lower for middle-income countries like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and it's low for countries in conflict and least developed countries. Specifically, deep diving into some of the measures that we see being implemented, you can see that in Saudi Arabia and Jordan, they have fully implemented female membership in the National Trade Facilitation Committees. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have fully implemented measures aimed at female traders as well. And in addition, they have also fully implemented a trade facilitation policy or strategy which incorporates special consideration for female traders. So these are positive steps. And enforcing these measures contributes to trade facilitation, increases inclusiveness, and also impacts development as a whole. Here you can see some of the positive steps being implemented by Jordan and Lebanon. So specifically, there have been specific trainings for women involved in trade, which are led by the ministries. And these relate to the simplified trading regime, trade finance initiatives, and regular data collection. So that's in Lebanon. And in Jordan, they have focused on trainings relating to internet and ICT skills and targeted awareness raising, including like informational material. So I think these demonstrate the importance of such activities and also the impact of such activities. So finally, in terms of policy priorities, it is our view at ESCWA, and this is what we're kind of working on. We're working on, first of all, research, data collection, and second of all, assisting countries in implementing trade facilitation measures. So advancing women in trade facilitation requires addressing the gender gap in education and skills and training, because it's these factors which undermine women's ability to engage in trade. But also many of the recommendations to promote women's role in trade also relates to kind of larger economic empowerment. So, for example, reforming gender discriminatory inheritance property labor laws. These are all very important, and it's what we work on at the ESCWA Center for Women as well. In addition, enhancing female producers and entrepreneurs' access to formal financing is extremely important so that they're able to kind of grow their businesses, to start their businesses as well. And engage in trade-related work. And the first step is to ensure that gender is mainstreamed in the design and implementation of trade policy. So this is something that is currently almost non-existent, and it's something that we're working on in the region. But this ranges from consultation processes to systematically understanding the nature of barriers. So we really need to generate more information to know and to monitor women's role in trade facilitation. And for that, we need gender differentiated statistics, which is again something we're working on at ESCWA, to measure and monitor the role that women play in business and entrepreneurship in international trade. So for that, we would encourage member states to engage in multi-stakeholder collaboration and regional cooperation, and to improve access for women to multiple resources such as finance, information, capacity building, and economic opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minal, on that. We started on a very, very powerful note with a survey that just looked at trade facilitation implementation, especially in regards to women. And now we are closing with a really a powerful one, similar, and we can see a lot of similarities in terms of implementation, low levels of implementation in the two different regions that have been polled, Africa and also in the MENA region. So I think we've come to the end of our webinar today, and in the interest of time, we will not be able to take questions. I would like to encourage that you email the questions, and we can be able to communicate to the different panelists the questions that you have, so that they may be able to respond to you. So just allow me to give an appreciation to organizers of the webinar, specifically United Nations Regional Economic Commission for Africa, Europe, ECA, Latin America and Caribbean, West Asia, in partnership with international organizations, including the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, for making this webinar a success. To the panelists, I believe the presentations that you have made have informed, on policies that will be implemented, on considerations on trade facilitation initiatives that countries will take up to be able to just ensure that we are having better interventions in terms of trade facilitation. I would like to take it back to Saul to just close for us this webinar. So if you're there, Saul, just give us a final parting shot.
Okay, thank you very much. But yeah, I just say thank you to ECA and Rose and all the panelists. But it really is led by ECA, the African Regional Commission. So I'll actually pass on to Nadia to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Nadia.
Thank you so much to Anne Rose and to all the panelists. I think we've had a very informative session. I know for us, it's given us a number of areas to look at further, particularly on these areas of what's working and opportunities, how to scale those up. So I'm very excited to be able to follow up with all of you. And I think we also now can reflect on the fact that we are measuring some of these aspects of what's working for women in trade facilitation. And so we continue to measure this and to work with all of our member states and governments to see that we are actually be able to capture the data on this and what's working. So thank you again for participating. You can find our survey results online, unpf.org, I believe. Yes. The link is in the chat. And as Rose said, please continue the conversation with us online, and we're happy to follow up with all of you. I also really like to thank Sue and Januan and Anissa, the whole team at ESCAP, for really supporting us to be able to do this. And we're looking forward to continuing to do these sessions and webinars and the different modules of the survey, bringing them to you so we can continue on this discussion of best practices. Thanks again. And Sue, if there's anything else remaining, please go ahead. And Rose, a fantastic job as always.
Thank you so much, Nadia, and thank you all for honoring the invitation. So I'd like to wish you a wonderful morning, evening, whichever time you are in, and see you next time.